June 23rd, 1757. A mango grove on the banks of the Bhagirathi River. On one side, 50,000 men, cavalry, war elephants, cannon, the full might of Bengal, the richest province on earth. On the other, 3,000 men, barely any cannon, no elephants, a company of merchants playing at war. By nightfall, an empire of 100 million people would belong to a trading corporation headquartered on a London street. Not because the British were stronger, not because they were braver, because one man in that 50,000-strong army had already decided, before a single shot was fired, that his king would lose. This is the story of the Battle of Plassey, the day India was not conquered, it was bought. To understand what was lost at Plassey, you have to understand what Bengal was. In the middle of the 18th century, Bengal was not a backwater. It was one of the wealthiest regions on the planet. Its weavers produced muslin so fine that a single sari could pass through a ring. Its ports shipped silk, saltpeter, and rice across the Indian Ocean. European traders didn't come to Bengal to civilize it. They came to beg for a piece of it. The British East India Company had been permitted to trade here under the protection of the Nawab of Bengal. Permitted, not entitled. There is a difference, and it is the difference this entire story turns on. In 1756, a young Nawab took the throne, Siraj-ud-Daulah. 23 years old, impulsive, proud, and surrounded, though he did not fully know it, by men who resented him more than they feared him. Siraj looked at the company's growing fortifications in Calcutta and saw exactly what they were: a foreign army disguised as a trading post. So he did what any sovereign would do. He attacked. He took Calcutta. He humbled the British. It should have been the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The East India Company did not respond as a wounded merchant. It responded as an empire in waiting. From Madras, it sent Robert Clive, a former company clerk turned soldier, a man who had already shown in the Carnatic Wars that he understood something most of his contemporaries didn't. In India, you did not need to outfight your enemy. You needed to out-negotiate him. Clive retook Calcutta. But retaking a city was never the goal. The goal was Bengal itself, its treasury, its trade, its throne. And Clive understood something the Nawab's own court had already made obvious. Siraj-ud-Daulah was not just fighting the British, he was fighting his own nobles. Chief among them, Mir Jafar, commander of Siraj's army, a man with royal ambitions of his own and a grudge against a young Nawab he considered beneath him. Clive did not need 50,000 soldiers to defeat. He needed one general willing to betray them. What followed was not planned in war rooms. It was negotiated in secret through intermediaries in the language every empire understands: money and power. The company's offer to Mir Jafar was simple. Betray Siraj-ud-Daulah on the battlefield. Hold your troops back when the fighting begins. In return, the throne of Bengal and a fortune beyond counting. Mir Jafar agreed. So did other commanders in Siraj's camp, drawn into the same web, men who had sworn loyalty to their Nawab and were now selling that loyalty by the hour. Siraj-ud-Daulah marched to Plassey believing he commanded an army of 50,000. In truth, he commanded perhaps a few thousand men who intended to fight at all. He was not walking into a battle. He was walking into an ambush, wearing the uniform of his own court.
June 23rd, 1757, morning.
Clive's force, barely over 3,000 men, roughly half of them Indian sepoys under British command, took position in the mango grove at Plassey, protected by earthen embankments and the river at their backs. Siraj-ud-Daulah's army advanced with genuine numbers, tens of thousands of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants, backed by French artillery crews still loyal to the Nawab. For a few hours, it looked exactly like what it was on paper, an overwhelming force closing in on a small colonial detachment. Then the rain came. A sudden monsoon downpour soaked the field. The Nawab's gunpowder, poorly covered, turned useless. The British, who had covered their own powder and ammunition, kept firing. And then came the moment the entire battle had been built around. Mir Jafar's division, the largest single body of troops in Siraj's army, simply did not move. No charge, no support, no relief for the men actually fighting. Tens of thousands of soldiers stood in the field as spectators to their own Nawab's destruction. One of Siraj's few loyal commanders, Mir Madan, fought on and was killed by cannon fire. His death broke what little coordination remained. Panic spread through the ranks faster than any British bullet. By early afternoon, Siraj-ud-Daulah understood what his own generals already knew. The battle was lost before the last shot was fired. He fled the field on a camel, disguised, toward Murshidabad.
Siraj-ud-Daulah did not escape for long. He was captured within days and executed on the orders of Mir Jafar's son, ending the last independent Nawabi line of Bengal in blood. Mir Jafar received exactly what he was promised, the throne of Bengal. What he did not understand, what perhaps he could never have understood, was that a throne handed to you by a foreign trading company is not a throne at all. It is a leash. Within years, Mir Jafar himself would be discarded by the same company he had served, replaced when he was no longer useful. The company had learned, at Plassey, that Bengal's throne could be bought and sold, and it never stopped buying and selling it again. The company walked away from Plassey with more than a battlefield. It walked away with the treasury of Bengal, tribute payments, and effective control over trade and taxation across one of the richest provinces on earth. A trading company had just become the ruler of tens of millions of people, and it had done so without defeating an army. It had simply purchased its command.
Historians still argue over exactly when British rule in India began, but there is a strong case that it did not begin with a treaty, or a coronation, or a proclamation. It began in a muddy mango grove, in the space between an order to advance and a general who chose not to give it. Plassey opened the door to nearly 2 centuries of colonial rule. Bengal's wealth, the wealth that had once made European traders come as supplicants, was steadily drained to fund company profits and, later, an empire. Famine would follow within a decade, in a province that had once fed itself with ease. And the pattern set at Plassey, divide the court, buy the general, let ambition do the fighting, would be used again and again as the company expanded across the subcontinent. One battlefield betrayal, 200 years of consequence.
Plassey is remembered as a battle. It was closer to a transaction. And its lesson has outlived every empire that has tried to forget it. An army of 50,000 cannot say the kingdom if the man commanding it has already sold the outcome. Where every conflict has a cause, every border has a cost, and every war leaves something behind. If this story moved you, subscribe to War and Military History, new documentaries on the battles that shaped our world every week. And don't forget, our short on Plassey drops tonight at 6 p.m. with the full documentary right here at 12 a.m.